You are listening to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa. This show is dedicated to those who live and love from the heart in infinite ways. In today's episode, we will discuss, share, gain insights, and get clarity on the wisdom and teachings of the mystic and seer Almin, as well as discover more about the miraculous healing modality called Belvaspata. Your host for this show is Paul.
Hello everyone, you are listening to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa. This is the show and episode for Thursday the 9th of February 2017. Thank you for joining us live, and thank you for all our new followers and everyone who is interested in the show, its content. Thank you for the messages of the insights received and for sharing from your heart. Part of our show is literally to become a process where we can all share, be together just for 1 hour a week and just be open and be who we are and just create processes that are of a nurturing and supportive nature. I'm Paul, I'm your host for today. I'm alone in studio today. Nico is handling our sound desk, and just to let you know, if there's hollow rings and noises in the background, we are still not up and running with all our technical efforts. We're still waiting on the insurance, and that is certainly causing us a great deal of trial and errors in terms of learning patience, but we are here. The show is happening in any form that it has to, and we are glad that you are all on board with us. Thank you very much indeed. After last week's show, some incredible information has been coming through, lots of people sharing, and this title for our episode tonight is called Epic Meltdowns, Destructuring, and Squeker Frogs. Yep, we're going to talk frogs as well. So on the 5th of January 2016, a post and message from the mystic and seer Almin says, how can you prevent the death of the Pacific Ocean? She says, beloved ones, I am asking you to stand by my side as we once more fulfill our role as the planetary sacred government. Here is what we need to change. Number one, the nuclear reactor meltdown that happened in Japan continues to shed nuclear radioactive waste into the Pacific Ocean every day. It is foreseen to do so in perpetuity. No person or machine can enter there because it is too hot and too damaging. All the countries around the Pacific Rim are severely affected, including Oregon, where I live, all the way down to the tip of South America. Number two, eventually this will circulate through all the Earth's oceans and seas. The Pacific will die and be unable to sustain life unless we change this. I no longer am able to feed my family seafood because the seafood radiation on this coast has gone up by some 300%. Number three, this is being kept a secret so as not to cause panic, whilst exploring the colonization of Mars, which will be disastrous, as I've explained in previous material. And over the last 2 episodes, we have played some of that material, audio material given and provided by the seer Almin, discussing all of that. We talked about the abandoned children, we talked about the children that are being kidnapped and stolen, and we went into aspects of the inner child and all sorts of processes with it. Fascinating insights. We're going to just play a short audio now by the seer Almin. It's one of her older audios, just for a few minutes. And she talks about earth changes and the basic preparations that we are having to work with at that time. But we find that this audio and content is quite relevant still.
As I have pointed out on the iTunes clips that we have prepared for you, it is so that we still could, in quite a likelihood, expect localized catastrophes to occur. The global catastrophes that will cause a massive lowering of consciousness will no longer occur. And we've explained that as well. But the fact that localized catastrophes, instead of lowering planetary consciousness, creates wave of empathy and compassion, could still be a factor in their occurring in the future. And if that is the case, my beloved Light family, it is necessary for us to be, in fact, prepared for the worst so that we can have the luxury of expecting the best. How do we take care of ourselves? Well, in the multiple books that I have written, I give you the tools. I give you the tools of reading your environment, getting clear enough to know your intuition. All of these things have been part of the journey of the books that I have written. But the part that I have not given you is the physical part, which I would like to discuss today. The physical preparedness comes in several instances. It comes in the form of shelter, it comes in the form of monetary preparedness, job preparedness, and sustenance, a very big one. So let's start with the big one first, sustenance. It is said if there is an emergency, part of the biggest problem is in fact shelter. But shelter can be taken care of a lot easier than you can take care of preparedness for food and sustenance, which includes water. So what I do at all times is I have a little tent handy. My sleeping bags are handy, and I can grab them at a moment's notice. And if I see that we are in troubled times, they could even find a nest in the back of my trunk. But the bottom line of it is, if I need to move out and have a tent to be in, it's available. One should also have a 14-day preparedness kit, basics that you can live on for 14 days. You should have in your savings, no matter what it takes, 3 months' worth of salary. You should also have approximately a year or so of food supplies for your family members. How do you do that? Well, it's not as complicated as it seems, because there are just 5 basic groups of food from which you can produce a year's worth of food. The first one is you need to have ability to have clean water. What I have is I have a little water distiller, and it will distill for me a gallon of water a day. I happen to live by the ocean, but even if I have to move inland, and even if the water source is polluted, a distiller will fix for me drinking water for my family for 1 day. I have a wood stove, just a little one, stuck in the corner of my garage. If we have no electricity, I can either cook there or I can cook in the fireplaces, and I can use it to distill the water that I need to. So let's take a look at the other food groups. You need salt. A bag of salt will see a family through a very, very long time. And then the next food group is that which is grain. Wheat that is organic, germinable, and hard winter wheat is the best. You will need 200 pounds of that per person for a year. From that, you can produce steaks from its gluten. You can produce sprouts, you can produce wheatgrass, bran, malt. All sorts of things can be produced from that. You need a sweetener. You need 50 pounds of honey per person per year. You can use sugar. In that case, you will need 100 pounds per person per year. Then the only thing you need in addition to that is something that produces calcium. You can either find a freeze-dried type of milk powder. Other milk powders lose their nutritional value after a short time. Or you can put away something like pinto beans, soybeans. You can produce milk from that if you need to. That basically takes care of it. Make a little place in your garage for it. Make sure that you have not only some cash on hand, but also some gold and silver in smaller denominations, and that you have some savings. In these times, when things change very rapidly, so could the job market. So make sure that you have that salary put away for your family. It is also very handy to have just a first aid kit handy and to know how to do CPR. But ultimately, my beloved brothers and sisters, none of this will be necessary for yourself if you are in the right place at the right time, because the global catastrophes will not happen. You will move prior to that. If you follow your heart's guidance, if we walk a path with heart, we are always living our highest truth. It's when our mind gets in the way that it muddies the water. Therefore, take time each day for deep, meaningful living. In the evening, look at the lessons and the insights of your day's experiences. In the morning, listen to the guidance of your heart. If you do this, you will always be living according to your highest truth, and your highest truth's intention is not that you suffer. Growth now comes through support.
And you're back in studio with your host. I'm Paul. Thank you for joining us today as we discuss epic meltdowns, as we share about aspects of programs and structures that are literally destructuring around us, and we're going to bring in aspects of Squeker frogs amongst other different discussions this evening. Thank you for joining us. So that was the Seer Almeen from a very old audio where she was discussing earth changes and the basic preparations that we all need to have, but then followed up in that particular post or in that particular track really about this is not necessary if we follow our heart's guidance and we know that growth comes through self-support. Very, very interesting details there, and always remains practical, and yet we live on the amazing edge of the matrix and all that is. So just to continue this message from Almeen and the post that she sent on the 5th of January about how we can prevent the death of the Pacific Ocean, Almeen talks about removing emotional pollutants. So I'd like to just ask you the following 9 particular points which we have been discussing amongst ourselves in various levels, and part of them are what we were discussing last week. They're still apparent, they're still with us. Number 1, have you got frozen shoulder muscles and stiff neck issues? Are you dizzy? Are you foggy? Are you forgetful? Is there no focus? Are you very moody? Last night I realized that through the density of the experience that I've been working through day by day, I came up with the term destructuring. It's absolutely everything is just destructuring around me. It was one of those incredible, insightful moments, and it just feels to me now that there's so much of massive destructuring within, and what we are doing mentally and emotionally is trying to reach within into that which we know. Of course, we are only finding the same programs, the same fears, the same processes all over again. And you might remember that last week we opened up our radio show with a post or a quote by Almeen talking about that protectiveness has no place any longer. The only thing to work with is trust. So this is certainly coming into effect. And if you're identifying any of these and sharing with them, please send us some messages right now on Squeker.com's website on the post section, and then we'll see what comes up and share that along the way. We're also going through what I'm seeing as intense heat waves within. It's as if these waves of massive heat, maybe radiation within the self, is coming up through the body, from the feet right up into the body, into the shoulders, and then through the head. I go red in the face for a few minutes and then it's clear. Number 4 is incredible feelings of density and emotional meltdowns, feelings that time is completely sped up or disappeared altogether. Did you know that the moon is shifting and altering its form? Last night, Nico and Zia came in and said, "Did I see the moon?" And then they explained about how, as they're looking at the moon is actually shifting its form, altering its form. So that's a whole new process that we need to look at. And of course, we know that the oceans are affected by the moon itself. So we feel that there's some clearing happening there on the ocean level. We're going to talk a little bit about some frogs in Zimbabwe and how important they are to this current setup that we've got. there's intense feelings also of wanting change in no uncertain way. And I'm getting posts from friends saying, I'm making change. And it looks like they are incredibly determined to do it. I resonate with those feelings. I understand them because all these plans are coming up within all of us here too. And I'm going to say, if you live near a beach, then you're very lucky because of the ocean, because of the sand, because of the nature around you. But then when we read the post from Almina about the radiation on the coasts, I'm going to say, are you actually lucky if you live near a beach? Fantastic insights and their different processes and perspectives. And number 9 is a very important one of something that we're seeing going on around us. We've been talking about the inner child for quite a while now. Last week we discussed aspects of it. The week before we talked about it as well. Is the inner child crying out for attention again and wanting to do just what it wants and nothing else, almost to the level of being spoilt, excluding anything and everything else around it, only wanting what it wants to feed itself, to look after itself, to take care of itself, and the other sub-personalities are not even allowed to come near it. So we're seeing a lot of that going on. If you're recognizing, please share. If you think that there's some more posts, then please send us that as well on our post list here, on our notice board here on Squeker.com. So in the meantime, Almeen talks about removing emotional pollutants. Let's go into that. She says what to do. Remember, we are the holy ones on the earth. We cannot allow our emotions to become hostile and polluted. We have to save the waters of the earth by removing that which pollutes the way we see life. We can no longer watch the sensational bad news on our TVs, on YouTube or other news media. Nor can we find the dysfunctional entertaining in movies and television. We can no longer marvel or feel repelled by the rotten parts of mankind's behavior. If we look for the bad, we will surely find it. Number 4, let us seek out the inspirational, the beauty of nature, the excellence of man's achievements. Even though we are aware of man's foolishness, let us search for the good in him, even though we may choose to interact sparingly to avoid being ensnared in his belief systems. Have you noticed how many people around you are trying to get you wrapped up into their own processes, into their own situations? Absolutely incredible the insights that are going on and the work that is making each one of us do. For me is incredibly profound. I'm incredibly blessed and feeling blessed and just to be able to understand that this is going on whatever level that I understand it. And thankfully my perception is allowing me to see a lot of it. And then a decision has to be made where one will be or what one will do. Almeen says, this will take a firm commitment and a concerted effort. Please help me to do this task. It is ours to do. So that was by the mystic and seer Almeen on a post from the 5th of January, and we're seeing more and more of it coming up. In fact, what I'm seeing at the moment, a lot of the processes here for me is that, let me just give you some clarity on the wording of what I'm trying to say here. We are often ahead nowadays in terms of the experiences that we are going through, but often we do not have words for them or a way to describe them until the seer Almeen posts something about it or until somebody else shares a different perspective about it from their angle, and then at that particular point it all comes together. But even when we look at the rune prediction of the week from Almeen, that has just come out for the 13th of February onwards, which we'll read out in a little while, you can see that these things and the way that they are going on, bit by bit, step by step, it is all happening. And we are going through those experiences. In fact, we are doing them now 2-3 weeks up front before we are seeing those news or the posts about it. And I think that's a very important thing for each one of us, for me, for you, for any one of us doing this level of work, to understand that we are the ones that are doing the shifting. We are altering our form. Things are coming forward a great deal. So we're going to now just talk a little bit about some frogs that are in Zimbabwe, a country just north of South Africa. And I'd just like to explain that in 2008, Nico and I were in a pod with the seer Almeen here in Johannesburg, July 2008. And she led us into a particular meditation. And through that meditation, Nico and I were having visions. We were seeing certain images and certain processes, working with certain intense feelings that were going on. And both Nico and I then privately wrote the notes of what we had seen, and we left it on her chair, and she collected that and then went to do the work at night, and then came back the next morning, as she does, and tells you all sorts of stories. So when she came into the class the next morning, she called Nico and myself in, and she said, look at this. I've been waiting for a long, long time for this kind of information. And what part of the information that I'd given her was that I'd seen myself flying as an eagle over the Victoria Fall area in Zimbabwe and Zambia. And I saw a shifting happening within the formation of the Victoria Falls. I saw the water change. There was so much going on. And of course, one's vision is very difficult to explain to anyone else when you haven't had the vision. So I'm just doing my best to give you the basics of it. It has never left me, the hugeness of that particular experience. And then what she did is, she pulled out a whole big sigil. And at that time, I was just saying to her, well, I felt that the political situation now in Zimbabwe was undergoing a massive shift, because at that time it was going through, well, it still is, but it's going through, a lot of shifts and change all by itself. And I liken the fact where I'd seen the openness of the Victoria Falls open up in the country of Zimbabwe. But then Armin explained that the libraries of information over South Africa and over Zimbabwe had actually opened at that particular time. We had accessed this information, and she said she'd waited a long, long time in order to finish and finalize the sigil of the mother, of the infinite mother. And that was in 2008. And that for Nico and I was an incredibly profound moment, and it changed a lot for many people around the world who follow Armin's teachings. And I was just saying to her, no way, I can't believe the hugeness of this. And she just simply said, yes, it comes when it must. And so now I read an article this week, and it hit me in very, very similar processes, very similar experiences. I had to sit back for a while, I had to take some deep breaths. And the article was about a rare cave squeaker frog, which was seen in Zimbabwe now for the first time in 55 years. And so now my interest was piqued, so I went to go investigate a little bit. I read the article, I went to understand what frogs were about, what they represented. And what really is about that a team of researchers have discovered 3 frogs that were once listed as possibly extinct. And this has been the first reported sighting since 1962. It's a rare frog, obviously has not been seen in decades, and it's been found in Zimbabwe. This frog is also known as the cave squeaker because of its preferred habitat. There's been no reported sightings since then. An international red list of threatened species tagged the frog as critically endangered and most possibly extinct. So there's a researcher at the Natural History Museum in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, said that his team found several specimens of the frog in a mountainous area in the east. The team found the first male on the 3rd of December 2016 after following an animal call that they had not heard before. They then discovered another 2 males and a female. They'd been looking for the cave squeaker frog for 8 years. He said that he was not with his team when they were found, and he was at the base camp because this man is a bit too old to climb mountains at the age of 75. And why I'm mentioning this is because, I'm looking at age, I'm looking at programming, and I'm just equating it all as one particular thing, is that when you are working with the ages, we actually can't climb the mountain of discovery. So we need that youthful endeavor. We need the inner child as well to have some fun with all of this. And I'm just linking the whole article to parts of the discussion that we're experiencing at this moment. So, of course, now researchers plan to breed more of these frogs and then obviously reintroduce them into the mountain summit. The frog is seen as tiny and it's light brown with dark spots. So now, of course, authorities there are fearing for the frog security because the scientific world has a huge interest on them, and a park management plan has been devised to protect this cave squeaker. So I'm just reminding you all that I had this huge moment where I had to sit back and look at it all. And then I realized that there were some deep insights here as to the discovery of this frog, because it's the first time it's been seen in a long time. It is a frog, and a frog represents the ability for us to see into new realms or into other realms. And also it was in a cave, and now it's been discovered and brought out of the cave into the light, so we are seeing so much more of all of that. Isn't that incredibly fascinating? So there they are, the rare cave squeaker frog, last seen 55 years ago, has now been discovered in Zimbabwe. So the world is being shifted because now we are able to see and have the ability to see into new realms previously hidden away in deep caves. So no more secrets, into the light. We're now going to listen to more Almin audio, and there's two classes we've put together. One of them is about enlightenment phases, to say that there's no destination, there's only a journey. And Almin also talks about the pitfalls of enlightenment and the aspects of obsessing over things. And really the only thing that we have to work on today is to understand that as the question arises, it arises simply because the answer is coming up from underneath and pushing the question away from the cave where it has been hiding. And this is how we continue to expand our perception and see into new and other realms. We'll be back on the other side of this audio.
I usually speak about that which does bring enlightenment. Well, today is the day we're going to speak about that which can trip us up. Some serious consideration needs to be given to these possible pitfalls along the way of enlightenment. The primary pitfall pointed to by seers of the Toltec tradition for eons of existence is the following: self-importance. And when they take a look at self-importance, they find that at the base of it is self-pity. Every moment of the day we need to be vigilant. It creeps up even years after we have gone into mastery, this issue of self-pity. The only thing that truly stamps it out, my beloved light family, is when we actually take full responsibility for our environment. When we know that as the major light showers of the planet, the major way showers, every action we do can change life forever around us. We then take full responsibility for clearing ourselves to clear the environment. It's really only then that we get rid entirely of the victim consciousness that breeds self-pity. The other thing that is a major issue is social conditioning. To note every moment whether we are living authentically or whether we are living according to the norms, the programming, the hype of what is supposed to be and what is not, that tells us how to be a woman or a man. We should know those instinctively from the heart. We do not need another's value systems to tell us what is right or what is wrong. There's really only one choice in all the cosmos: what is life-enhancing to the whole and what is not. That's all. Nobody needs to tell us how to be. Then there is another, and that is a very large pitfall. It is the one of identity, exploited by teachers who wish to give us identities so that they will feed the ego. The task of a true teacher is not to feed the ego. The task of the true teacher is in fact to eliminate identity, setting one free from going round and round the fishbowl from one teacher to the next and never making it to the place where there is silence of the mind, which is the place of mastery. To get there, we need to have a teacher that themselves have shed that identity. The shedding of identity is not the same as lack of self-love. It doesn't mean that because you don't have identity, that you do not value the vessel of the body, that you do not take time to dress the body in a way that pleases you, no one else, yourself, the way you would take time to prepare a meal with care, because you honor the body enough to care the vibrations and the food that goes into it. So the lack of ego, and that means identity, is very important along this route. Be very vigilant about teachers that tell you you are the second son of Isis's brother, or you are the third goddess, 3 moons removed, etc. Please be very careful. In the beginning, light workers tend to find themselves in a bigger identity. That's true. That helps. But there's another one beyond that. Then another one beyond that. And eventually we find that we are a being as vast as the cosmos and beyond, having a human experience. And that anything else is but a role. Now there is another thing that is more subtle and is another way of obtaining an identity. And that is to focus on the dark side. My brothers and sisters, I have given the good news over and over again, as I've seen it develop, as Mother and Father have spoken to me and given it to me directly. We have overcome the illusion-based beings of the cosmos. There is not a single demonic being or underworld left. So what is there, in fact, to focus on but the light? All illusion is done away with, and I've explained what that means in the book, The Ring of Truth. And now it is for us to focus on the light. Yet so many persist to focus on the dark. Why is that? Well, once again, because to peddle fear-based teachings makes a lot of money for many light workers. They peddle fear, and then they pertain to have the answers. And so they say that they have the answers and come to them if you want them. But the bottom line of it is, they invite us to focus on the dark so we would know that we are not that, a way of gaining an identity as a being of light, and a very large pitfall along the way of our light unfolding. People often wonder about enlightenment. They use the word as though they know exactly what it means, thinking that there must be some state that we can reach that either has total emptiness, lack of desires, and a place in which mind can just expand into the furthest reaches of the cosmos, or, alternately, they have at least become aware that beyond this state of emptiness, upon the path of enlightenment, there lies yet another stage. And this stage is in fact the stage of bliss. So the stage of bliss is a little more desirable, and many wish for the state of enlightenment that they may live their life in a state of bliss, not feeling pain, not feeling hunger or lack. Well, that is just a different form of a drug, because enlightenment, if it is a fruitless life, living in a state of bliss, is unproductive and ultimately does not contribute to the whole. A life that is not meaningfully lived cannot be enlightened. So let's take a look at what is enlightenment. Enlightenment is not a point of arrival. Enlightenment is an ever-unfolding evolution. It's interesting how it happens, because like a pyramid that in perfect proportions would have a specific ratio of its sides to its base, think of the sides as emotion. Think of the base as perception. As we go through the stages of man's evolution, coming all the way to the apex, which is ascended mastery, the different phases within the stages of ego identification, God consciousness, ascended mastery, the evolutionary stages of the consciousness of man, in fact, at times, the base, which is perception, grows very, very large, and then there is hardly any emotions as the sides flatten to accommodate this enlargement of the pyramid base, if you will. Other times, emotion gets incredibly intense, very much elongated sides of the pyramid. The base becomes too small for the sides. So it has to again rectify itself. In other words, emotion must yield perception, and perception must yield emotion. In ascended mastery, we don't have that. We have a big base on the pyramid with almost no sides, meaning that we are in a vastly expanded state of perception or awareness, but there is hardly any emotion. But is there something beyond that? Yes, there is. And up until August of 2005, 9 ascended masters had actually found the way out of the fishbowl. They had found the stages beyond man, which is the God kingdom. It is the divine heritage of man to make his or her way into the God kingdom. But for that, yet again at a time when the least emotion of all is felt, in the final phase of ascended mastery, he or she has to generate emotion so that the emotional sides of the pyramid rise even higher than the base. That is the key to leaping across the chasm. The saints of all ages have called it the Great Divide because of the fact that beyond it, there is a very large leap to get to a whole new kingdom, a whole new species, if you will, a God being in the flesh. It is doable. There are ways in which the emotion can be raised, and it utilizes sacred sexuality or the rising of the Kundalini, which will once again prompt you into emotion. It is doable, yes, but only if you realize that life is in fact a journey, not a camp.
And that was the Mystic and Seer, giving us a lot of beautiful information and sharing all about the phases of enlightenment, the pitfalls that we experience going through stages of enlightenment, and about the obsessions of the dark sides and looking for the dark things within things and giving them an identity, etc., etc. Almin said there that our divine heritage is to make our way into the God kingdom, and more about that towards the end of the show. She also said there that the question really is, what is life enhancing and what is not? We'd just like to add that that was a bit of an old audio, and although it is incredibly pertinent and inspiring for the times that we are in right now, the shifts that have come up within the new precepts for Toltec warriors, and that can be purchased as an audio book where Almin goes through these new precepts, and she says in those precepts that things have changed. It used to be what is life enhancing and what is not, but those are aspects of duality. When you have something there and you have something here, there's a sense of duality, and the polarity that runs between it is what has to be really dissolved. And so as this is all happening, the new precepts for Toltec warriors came up, and that aspect of what is life enhancing has changed. And the precept is very interesting because Almin said in that particular audiobook, what is life enhancing or what is more life enhancing? And that's an interesting concept to actually be able to work with, because there's actually just a question with another question, and there's no yes and no answer to it. It is simply yes or yes even more to something. And let me make it easy to explain it. You have either one layer of chocolate cake or you have 2 layers of chocolate cake. Make your choice. Both are enjoyable depending on where we're at any one particular moment. So we've been speaking also about the inner child a lot. A lot of people would understand that. If you're new to the show, we just like to say is that Almin teaches about the sub-personalities, about the sacred family, all working together to create a state of self-government and to be able to self-sustain and to be able to work within these states of resurrection, all one feeding the other and no one apart from the other, yet individual and yet supportive on all levels. And that work is an ongoing process that comes in course after course, book after book, on deeper and deeper levels. And here in Belvaspata Healing South Africa, the crew and the team members and a lot of the family around us are all working on that and sharing a lot of those particular processes. Do join us and share with us. And of course, please use Squeker.com to share your information as the show proceeds, or send us an email after the show to info@belvaspata.co.za. Let's talk a little bit about this aspect of divine heritage and living in joy, and talk about the inner child. And there seems to be this whole aspect, as I said in point number 9, right at the beginning of the show, is the inner child crying for attention again and wanting to do just what it wants and nothing else. And that's what seems to be coming out. I feel it rising up within myself, and it's something I have to work on constantly. And it's like I have to stop myself. It's my way and only my way, that kind of thing. And thankfully, I'm able to breathe through a lot of it and just let things move on and start to, make shifts as we're going on. But I'm seeing it within youngsters. I'm seeing a lot of those things around us. And perhaps you're identifying that aspect of it. It has to do with self-pity, by the way. And Almin was talking about that in the earlier audios about the enlightenment phases. So, interesting now is that a vaccine has been created, officially announced, and this vaccine is to reverse diabetes in the whole world. This we're all celebrating. It's absolutely incredible. I just want to say is that I'm really not sure about the way a vaccine works or should work. I don't quite know if I agree with it or disagree with it. It's something I would choose not to do for myself because of past health issues that have been picked up due to vaccines. So I do suppose, really, as I'm talking about it, I feel probably more against it, but I don't want to do a call here and says, yes, do this or don't do it. But it's just something I think at this moment we should be celebrating. And I'm just going to go with that particular point here, that obviously the world is now ready for a cure. And so a first level process has now arrived, and it has arrived through scientific measurements. But let's look at this aspect of joy. We know from some teachings, and diabetes is seen as the search for joy within, and let's liken that to the inner child. And we've said in the past few shows a little while that the inner child has to grow up but still be joyous and happy, still be a child but has to grow up, has to get rid of the childishness of things. And that's a fascinating insight. Now, of course, within other healing processes, we know that the spleen is affected through diabetes, and that the spleen is likened to the aspects of finding joy and working with joy in one's particular life. So for the Belvaspata healers out of there, we do recommend that you look within level 1 and 2 sigils, and you start to bring the sigils for the spleen into play here, because that also allows the frequency of the spleen to be raised and therefore joy to come to the surface. The little frog is coming out to squeak from the deep dark cave, if you get my drift at that particular moment. So currently in the United States alone, over 1.25 million people suffer from type 1 diabetes. So the newest research for this vaccine has used something for tuberculosis, a particular strain of it, and they've figured out that it can reverse this disease. The vaccine has, however, been used for 100 years and has shown great results as well in the treatment against, for instance, bladder cancers. The FDA will start testing the vaccine on over 150 people who are now in advanced stages of type 1 diabetes. Please remember that within the Southern African context, tuberculosis, or TB as we call it, is rife. Diabetes rife and HIV rife, all linked at this particular moment in time. And I'd like to take you back to an episode or two of our radio show last week or the week before, I can't remember, where I think a couple of weeks back, where we read out, I think it was the beginning of the year already, where we read out some language or some wording from the Library of the Ants, which Almin had translated in 2008. And it was a discussion really which was likened to the aspects of curing HIV/AIDS on the planet. And they were saying is that when HIV is cured, then all other diseases will also be cured. Man is no longer affected by it. And about 3 or 4 weeks back, I apologize, I can't remember the actual show, but you can go research it. It's online there. And we spoke about how a vaccine for HIV had now been developed and was now being tested. And all likelihood, they had discovered a cure for HIV/AIDS epidemic. So science has yet created it. Definitely it is there. But for me, are the people on our planet ready for the change? And that to me is what is bringing this in, is that we are ready to actually live in a different realm of being, that we are no longer going to live in a lack of joy, despite all the controlling, despite all the programming, despite all of those aspects that are going on in the media. And that search for joy is now something that we need to take charge of. And, I was saying earlier in point number 7 that we seem to have lots of intense feelings of wanting change in our lives, and in no uncertain way. And if you think about those particular aspects, those desires that you have coming up within you, it's wanting to go live in a state of creativity, a state of happiness. It's like we are moving away from the mediocrity of day-to-day life, and we want to live in more meaningful ways. And I think that these are not just desires, but I think that we as human beings, taking our divine heritage, making our way through into the God kingdom and creating it, we are starting to take hold of those facts and starting to be more accountable for all of that. Even though the inner child is still crying for help and attention, we are going to be working through it. Almin said earlier that we can do this, and please help her to work with it. Very interesting indeed, this whole particular process. So these patients have been injected with this vaccine, showed an increase in the level of substance called tumor necrosis factor, TNF. This increased levels in the system then eliminates T cells, which are impeding the production of insulin. So these patients, as they were injected with this tuberculosis vaccine, which, by the way, was just 2 times during a 4-week period, the given results were incredible. The harmful T cells were gone, and in some cases, patients began to secrete insulin on their own. In other words, their level of joy began to work through the spleen and through the other factors within the physical system, and so they begin to take more control of their lives. Incredible that we're getting this process going on. We know that there's a new upcoming trial as well. There'll be a guideline very much as this previous one, but it'll be over a time period of 4 years. However, I think it might take us 3 to 4 years as humanity to shift into a different consciousness and then get rid of the need for the vaccine altogether, because we will have understood deep down that there is a cure, and therefore we are able to create it. So congratulations, humanity. The HIV epidemic should be coming to an end over the next few years. Diabetes, as an end is coming up, tuberculosis will be coming to an end in our planet, and things will start to shift. Absolute time to celebrate. And I just like to just say how happy I am to read all of this, even though I am uncertain about the aspect of vaccines. And I know that many of our listeners today may not be happy about the fact that there is a vaccine there, but I'd just like to say this is step 1. And then perhaps the next step for all of us is to remove the need for a vaccine within our body and develop enough antibodies, develop an immune system that would never collapse due to our changes in our lifestyle and the way that we perceive and the way that we grow. And there we go, all about the advent of a new vaccine to cure diabetes in this planet. Absolutely incredible there. Darshana, thank you very much for your post earlier. You were talking about the need to deconstruct and destruct in order to reconstruct. Absolutely. I think we cannot build on the old. We simply let go of that which no longer holds resonance within us, and we bring a new frequency into being. And talking about frequency, humans are waking up. This is an interesting bit of news that came up this particular week. For the first time in recorded history, the Schumann resonance was jumping to 36 plus hertz, and this is a big, big deal for us all. In 2014, it was considered something unique for the frequency to have risen from its usual 7.83 frequency to somewhere in the 15 to 25 hertz levels. And that's what it looked like in 2014. However, now in 2017, it is now spiking at well over 30 for the past 2 days and still rising. There's lots of information online about the Schumann resonance. I don't have to give you that link. You've got Google. Please go and access it all and just enjoy what is going on there. So just click on Schumann resonance and you'll get a lot of information. But according to Wikipedia, the Schumann resonance are a set of spectrum peaks in the extremely low frequency portion of the Earth's electromagnetic field spectrum. The Schumann resonances are global electromagnetic resonances generated and excited by lightning discharges in the cavity formed by the Earth's surface and the ionosphere. It has long been suspected that human consciousness can impact the magnetic field and create disturbances in it, particularly during moments of high anxiety, tension, and passion. I like the way all those are linked together. According to these articles, as human beings, we have extraordinary potentials that we have hardly begun to study, much less understand. Creative gifts, intuitions, and talents that are unpredictable or emergent may become stabilized in generations to come. Hopefully, we can learn to understand both our emergence from an essentially electromagnetic environment and facilitate our potential for healing, growth, and non-local communications. Many people have been reporting the feeling that time has been speeding up. Could the increased frequencies have something to do with this? There's lots of different discussions on YouTube as well, so you can just go in and type in there about Schumann resonance. Okay, as we talk about all of this, we must remember that for many years the resonance frequency has hovered at a steady 7.83 Hz with very slight variations. In June 2014, that changed. Monitors at the Russian Space Observing System showed a sudden spike in activity to around 8.5 Hz. Since then, they have recorded days where the Schumann accelerated as fast as 16.5 Hz. At first, they did think that the equipment was malfunctioning, but later learned that the data was completely accurate. Everyone was asking, what's causing this intermittent spiking activity? Is the Earth's frequency speeding up? Well, since the Schumann frequency is said to be in tune with the human brain's alpha and theta states, this acceleration may be why it often feels like time is sped up and events and changes in our life are happening more readily. So I just want to say is that, diabetes itself is a trap. It's a program. It's about not living in joy, not feeling one's self-worth and able to live in joy. And therefore the diet and all of those particular processes change and alter accordingly. And these have a great aspect of changing things, within this of it keeps us trapped in the mediocrity of particular processes of medication, of chronic medication, etc., etc. And just think about as we freed ourselves from these particular traps, as we learn to live in joy, of course, these frequencies then have to shift and humanity then begins to live in a much higher frequency. So these emerging resonances are naturally correlated to human brainwave activity. This means we are changing. A 7.83 Hz frequency is an alpha theta state. It's relaxed, yet kind of dreamy, sort of neutral idling state waiting for something to happen. At 8.5 up to 16.5 Hz frequency, one moves out of the theta range into more of a full karma alpha state, with a faster, more alert beta frequency starting to appear. And this correlates with slowly waking up cognitively. Our thought processes would become clearer and more focused, yet we are still in the flow or in the know. In other words, Mother Earth is shifting her vibrational frequeny, and perhaps so are we. This may be one of the many signs that we are awakening. I'd just like to remind everybody that those who have been working with the teachings of this year, we are in the third stage of resurrection. The white light carries all frequencies within it, all colors. Color and frequency are absolutely linked. The white light contains all frequencies. And the third stage of resurrection is where we have this magnificent, incredible white life emanating out into the planet. And of course, frequencies then have to change. The magnetic field is shifting as we enter into this third state of resurrection. Remember, of course, the Belvaspata healers, you have frequency and light working together, and frequency adapts and brings everything up as an electrical charge, and light in some way highlights the illusion so that we see it in a better way, we see it from a different perspective, and the frequency then connected on an angelic level allows us then to move that particular illusion and bring perfection from a state of what we previously thought was imperfection. So, the article that I'm reading now that says that I was told, not me, but whoever wrote the article, was told by a wise old sage from India that the magnetic field of Earth was put in place by the ancient ones to block our primordial memories of our true heritage. This was so that souls could learn from the experience of free will unhampered by memories of the past. He claimed that the magnetic field changes are now loosening these memory blocks and we are raising our consciousness to greater truth. The veil is lifting. The blinders are coming off. If true, this raises even more intriguing questions for us. So, whatever is happening, it's clear that this acceleration may make you feel more tired, exhausted, dizzy, depressed, and even strange as you raise your own frequencies to be more in tune with the new earth. Adaptation is not always an easy process, but keep in mind it's all part of your own unique awakening. So, recent update in this last few days is that we are now running straight down the line with a 30 plus resonance, up to 36 hertz resonance, and it seems like it's just getting more constant and more stronger as we're going along. Well, fascinating insight about the Schumann resonance, and congratulations, light workers around the world. You're definitely doing the work, and therefore the white light is shifting, frequencies are adapting and lifting, our perception is growing, and we are starting to say, I want to live in joy. Let's listen now to the Seer Almin as she discusses going from ascension beyond religion, and it's not a subject matter that she often brings up. It is an audio from the past, but very pertinent right at this moment as we release the belief systems of the past.
I want to break my silence about something that generally in classes I do not wish to speak about. And I distinctly ask my students that I am willing to share with them just about everything that I know, anything I know, except that I really do not wish to speak about the religious leaders of the world. I wish to explain why. My brothers and sisters, where the earth began its ascension from in 2005, at that very first few days in February, when it started to move up in a very rapid ascension, it had actually, if you read carefully the second half of The Gift of the Unicorns, which I took from the History Keepers of the Cosmos, it had already been, for some trillions of years, in an ascension process. It had for trillions of years descended, and it was in the cosmos a time of ascension, at least for the last several thousand years. But during those several thousand years, the earth has been moving up and up and up, and then very dramatically and rapidly as of February of 2005, from which we can truly say the earth was in ascension, meaning far more dramatically than it had been. I was sent back, as I've mentioned on some of our other clips, twice to the old earth. And each time I went back to the old earth, it was like going into hell. It was that far below from where we were, but we had no idea how far we had risen. If going back to 2005 was such a tremendous lowering of consciousness, it was such a drop, it was such density, can you imagine what it would be like to go back a few thousand years? Mother has sent me back not only a few thousand years, but far further than that, on various work that I have had to perform. My brothers and sisters, it's never a pleasant experience because of how dense those times were. If you took someone off our street today that is a light worker and you put them back a few thousand years, let's say 6,000 years, they would most surely be the wisest master on earth. So we've had religious leaders through the ages, and thank goodness we did. But whoever they are, they were for their specific time the religious leader. To focus on one of these leaders as though it is the infinite being, be it a he or a she, as though they are the infinite being, is a very large mistake. When somebody says that they are one with the infinite being, it is where all of us should currently be, which means that we realize that we are a consciousness superimposed over the infinite's being. The infinite lives in us and has the infinite's being there, and we live in the infinite. It is the way of life, and a master recognizes that. So when someone says that they are one with the infinite, it doesn't mean they are the infinite. It means that they are perhaps a profound religious leader for their time, serving a beautiful and monumental purpose of some kind. It is therefore important that we do not focus on the finger as it points to the moon. The infinite is within. The kingdom of heaven is within. And within there is something that is far beyond any personality. It is the infinite. My brothers and sisters, we were told, "Go ye forth and do the things that I have done, yea, even greater." We have done such overcoming. Each light worker in their own life has gone through their total Gethsemanes to get where we are. We need to give ourselves that recognition.
And you're back in studio. I'm your host for today's show. My name is Paul, Team Belvaspatar Healing South Africa in the studio. Thank you to Nico also for handling our sound and technical aspects. Apparently we're running the show quite well today. No drops in signal, etc. So that's also fantastic and nice to share with you all. Thank you for staying with us. As we enter the last parts of the show, just to remind you that we are now working with the teachings of the mystic and seer Almin, and we've been listening to her audios today. There'll be plenty more in shows to come. Let's now take all of that particular aspect, and before we summarize it, we'd just like to read out Almin's weekly rune prediction for the week starting from February the 13th up to 19th. Here's the mind-blowing bit. Thank you to Darshana just for posting it a few minutes before the show began, and here it is. Time to re-evaluate. It's rune 5.4, fertile possibilities. The explanation this time requires that you redefine and re-evaluate the foundational qualities of character you have valued. What is honesty? Why does the mind value order and control? You are preparing for a limitless life. The values that mind has created impose limit within it, which it can exert control. By seeing core values in a new light, we release the bindings of the old dreams, of fertile possibilities of a higher reality opening up to us. Really interesting is that the last few shows as well, we've been asking you to check your current value systems, if it's still valid for you or if something needs to shift and let go, because those value systems are possibly a program of what you think is right or wrong and will need to be worked on. And of course we are given countless opportunities every day to check all of that. So let's summarize our show today. Almin tells us to follow our heart's guidance through deep, meaningful living, even if we are only doing that for a few minutes each day, in the evening or in the morning, for example. We talked about that we are currently experiencing a meltdown of the old beliefs and programs. We are destructuring the old. Humanity now has to achieve and is achieving a higher consciousness. We are all now resonating on higher frequencies and light. The Pacific Ocean is polluted. Almin is teaching us that we cannot let our emotions become polluted. That is the process of all life altering along the way, is that we go above the pollution of our emotions and only seeing the good in humanity around us, even if we tread carefully amongst them. We must remember that the nuclear reactor meltdown that has happened in Japan is an ongoing process, and by some reports is getting even worse. But what is right or wrong, I don't know. What is true or not, I don't know. I'm just simply saying that that is out there. But emotional meltdowns are happening within us, and we need to carefully work through all of those processes and own who we are. A vaccine cure for diabetes has been found. It is linked to TB, so let us breathe and live in joy and work on becoming all of that. Darshana has just reminded us that the healer Louise Hay also talks about diabetes as being the need to control. So that's also fascinating insight. The Earth's frequency have increased, has increased due to the new magnetic white light that we are all emitting. Yes, peeps, you and me, we are all doing that particular work. So take care you are not running on old values and looking for programs within the mind or the emotional self. And then don't forget, frogs are beautiful even if they live in caves and squeak. They're up on the surface and they've been discovered. So we are going to be seeing into other realms as we go along. Let's close off today's show by a beautiful bit of wisdom from the mystic and seer Almin. This is a hard-hitting one. You might need to listen to it for a few times over and over again. If not, I can send you the information and we'll post it up onto our local WhatsApp group, support group there, and you can all work with it. And here we go. We are heirs to the kingdom of the one life. We are not beggars at the gate. Yet we try and justify our existence by doing good deeds and becoming more and growing into something greater, as though we are imperfectly created. We often put up with the dysfunctional and the unacceptable as though we do not deserve better, thereby dishonoring the divinity that expresses through us as our life. And that's our closing wisdom from the mystic and seer Almin. Thank you for joining us. Please press follow on Squeker.com so that you know immediately that we are on air every Thursday, 8 p.m. South African time. There are links on our website, www.belvaspata.co.za. This is also a reminder that this coming Saturday, the 11th of February in the afternoon, we have a Yoga of Illumination Devi Sattva Yoga class in play, and we look forward to everyone joining us there. From me, Paul, and from our sound desk, Nico, we are wishing you goodbye, good night, and thank you for listening to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa.
You've been listening to Radio Belvaspata, South Africa. Thank you for listening and sharing in our discussion. Should you have any questions with regards to the healing modality of Belvaspata or have any healing needs, please send us an email to info@belvaspata.co.za or add comments to our page on Squeker.com so we can work on providing a suitable response. We now close this episode with the eternal ascension qualities of love, praise, gratitude and trust, and look forward to sharing again with you next week. Goodbye.